Mary needed more proof of Jesus' resurrection. She would soon have it. On this episode of 10-Minute Bible Study, wherein we are studying the Gospel of John in 10-minute, easily digestible bites 5 times a week. The disciples had seen the grave close and the empty tomb and had departed. Mary, it seems, had made her way back to the scene of the crime, so to speak. But we have no mention of her going with Peter and John or participating in their foot race. I'm guessing those two guys, they were looking around, Mary gradually made her way back to the tomb to look back. Wouldn't you? If the body of your friend was stolen, wouldn't you hang around to try to investigate and figure it out? And that's what she did. John 20, verses 11 through 13. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb, and as she wept, she stooped down to look into the tomb, and she saw 2 angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she said to them, "They have taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they have laid him." Now, we wish to start screaming as we read this text. You should be happy, Mary, he's risen. But like I said, she didn't really know that yet. As she cries, I can see her crying and bawling, and she stoops down into the tomb to have a look. This is the first mention of her looking into the tomb. Recall before, when she arrived with the 3 women early in the morning with the spices, she saw the stone rolled away, and then she ran right back to the disciples, leaving the women there. But this time she peeks in, and as she peeks in, she sees those angels that those other women see. Why John and Peter didn't see them, I don't know. Perhaps because Jesus was preparing to reveal himself to them in another way. But this time they were sitting on where Jesus' body has been, the angels were. Instead of saying, "Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is risen," they simply asked her why she was crying. They simply asked her that. And she explained in the same words that she explained it to the disciples, that someone had taken the body of the Lord away. And this time she said, "But I don't know where it is." Before she had said we. This time she was speaking for herself. She was continuing the investigation of what happened to the body of the Lord. So why didn't these angels explain to Mary that Jesus was alive, like they had done to the previous women? Well, they were saving it for someone else to do that. John 20, verses 14 to 16. Having said this, Mary, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there. But she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Now, why did Mary turn around and away from the angels like that while they were talking and while she was talking to them? We're not told. Perhaps she heard Jesus, or maybe she had a sense that there was somebody standing behind her like we do. You know that, how that works. The ancient church fathers are in pretty much agreement that the angels must have motioned to her in some way so that she would know to turn around. Maybe they made a gesture with one of their angelic hands, or maybe their eyes suddenly turned to someone behind her. And that would be typical of angels, to notice Jesus above all else. So they went like this, and she followed where their eyes. We're not sure what made her turn around and see that. But so Jesus then asks her the same question. Why are you weeping? Then adds, whom do you seek? And I don't know why she didn't recognize him and took him for the gardener. We don't really know why this this is happening, but she might not have looked at him directly. When a person is grieving, they often spend a lot of time looking off into the distance or looking down to the floor. It's hard to pay attention to anything else but your grief when you're in the midst of sadness, and you lose your ability to discern things. Because she was grieving, and because she had this notion in her head that somebody had taken the body and she was on the case for that, it made sense to her that the gardener would have something to do with it. And so when she sort of glanced at Jesus' presence, she thought he was the gardener and wanted to talk about what happened with the body. Maybe they hadn't done the proper paperwork or something. That would be the way it is in our day. Or maybe this guy, the gardener, was in charge of all the stuff that happened in there, and he was surprised to find a body in a tomb so late in the day, and removed it because he thought it was a violation of someone's property. It could be all of that stuff might have been running through Mary's head as she met and thought Jesus was the gardener, and she is asking questions like somebody who wants to get to the bottom of a great disappointment, like the loss of Jesus' body. So as Mary was kind of babbling on a lot about this, she turned her back away from Jesus and faced into the tomb again. And then Jesus utters a word, her name. Mary, he says. Now when the shepherd of the sheep calls to his sheep by name, they hear him. She wheeled around and exclaimed, Rabboni, which is Aramaic for the Hebrew rabbi or teacher. He called her name, and she recognized him immediately. And it seems that she started hugging the stuffing out of him. Wouldn't you? Jesus' response, of course, is difficult to understand, I think. John 20, verses 17 through 18. Jesus said to her, Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, I have seen the Lord, and that he had said all these things to her. So Jesus says, don't cling to me? That doesn't sound like Jesus. Some of the other women, reported in Matthew 28:19, or I don't think that reference is quite right. In Matthew, the account, they are reported to have taken hold of his feet and worshipped him. And he didn't stop them. Later, Jesus is going to tell Thomas to put his finger into his wounds, and he didn't stop him. And the explanation that Jesus gave, for I have not yet ascended to my Father, that doesn't really seem to make sense. Now I'm really confused. What does ascending to the Father have with his availability for hugging purposes? Now some have said that he was basically saying, you don't have to hold on to me tightly. I haven't ascended yet. I'm not going anywhere for a while. That could be it. Then he says, you go tell my brothers. Maybe that's all it was. Don't hug on me. I need you to go. The most important, there's an urgency to getting the word out to his disciples that Jesus was risen. And maybe that's what this is about. Another explanation was to make it clear to Mary that he was indeed back and alive, but they were not going to be returning to the good old days where they walked around the countryside and he taught them and stuff like that, as Mary remembered. It wasn't going to be like that anymore. There was a transition that was taking place. Jesus had completed his mission. He would soon ascend to take the throne of his father's David. He was now Lord of all. As a kid, I surmised that the body of Jesus had undergone some sort of glorious transfiguration, which would make it difficult for her to recognize him. That's why she didn't recognize him at first. And sinful folk simply cannot touch a heavenly form without having some injury. And maybe that's why Jesus, that's how I thought when I was a kid. I'm not really satisfied with any interpretations of this. This is one of those things that when we get to heaven, we will hopefully understand automatically, because then we will know all things and it will be cleared up and make sense. And I'm sure it's one of those things we'll go, oh, and we'll say, that's cool. Probably something like that. But needless to say, the point is, Mary Magdalene was chosen to be the first person to see the risen Lord Jesus. And that's something.